Hello everyone, my name is Vijay Kulkarni. Just to quickly introduce myself on what I do. I work with CA Technologies, which is now a Broadcom company. I work as a solution program manager, and I closely associate with this particular topic. So I was interested to see what else I can get out of my research, and also how I can benefit out of it. So that was another intention of doing this, and also coming out and sharing my thoughts and experiences. Right? And my topic is only around regulation and compliance, though the topic what we discussed last time was also to consider predatory pricing, but my thought process was predatory pricing to be dealt not with agile methodology as such, but predatory pricing is more to do with the pricing and marketing strategies and how you really tackle the price war in the market. It's nothing to do with agile is what my belief is. So I kept that topic outside of this discussion, and only focus is on regulation and compliance part of it. So sorry about any disappointments if anybody was looking for.
No, I think that was the expectation when you took up the topic last time, because we spoke a lot about the healthcare industry for those of us, some of you who were not there in the previous meetup. So some things that we spoke about was you want to be as agile as you can. Like I have been in aerospace, Honeywell, then I have been in medical, health, Philips Healthcare, Siemens Healthcare. The challenge is that you want to be a bit more faster to market and everything, and then we also have some external body like hey, wait there, until you have our approval you can't go to market, right? And it's life and death when you talk about aerospace or a medical especially. It's not like releasing a feature on Amazon. It's okay, it's not life and death if you cannot buy the television today, but you can buy it half an hour later, but it's not so in that. So we specifically got this topic where you say that you want to be more agile, but there is an external force somewhere trying to control you in how much agile you can be, and then how do you work with those external stakeholders. So one topic that Savita spoke about was internal, more of cross-organizational, within an organization, cross-department and other things. One is outside, so that's how the topics were picked up. So the expectation was anyway to hear from you more on external forces that kind of influence our
predatory pricing is especially to do with the marketing strategies and pricing strategies which any company would want to go about. So I felt it's nothing to do with agile per se, but that's where I kept that topic outside. It's a very long one, but the gist of that is to make agile as a mainstream methodology. What were the major hurdles? Initially they thought of geography. Then most of us know that people talk of mindset, leadership involvement, so many other stuff which are real obstacles to implementing agile in the right way. So out of that, compliance is one more thing where that comes with a fixed scope, fixed timeline, so that doesn't allow you to really experiment with agile in a real sense. But there are ways in which we really be able to tackle through agile ways of working that we'll try to see that as we move forward. So finally, this is going to be a hurdle, not a barrier to agile implementation. So we'll categorize the problem statement into two. One being on the compliance and regulation side, and another being on the agile teams who work on those projects as such. So on the compliance and regulations, why is it really so tough? Because it is a very complex subject. We know how our life insurance policies are worded, right? It's very hard to understand what they really mean by it. And it's like any other policy, any other conditions goes with it. It is really complex, and sometimes it is very sometimes it will be worded very differently, and it's always in the interest of the company which is really taking that consent from the user. So if you have gone through a couple of those sessions where our Facebook guy, the Mark Zuckerberg, attended to answer some of the questions of the US senators. So one of the senator made a very bold statement saying, your user agreement sucks. That doesn't make any sense. You cannot really deny what you are really agreeing to. So that's how it is. So they are complex. You don't really understand it. It is very changing environment based on how the market trend is, how the things are happening in the world. That keeps changing, and more scrutiny. There are authorities, there are regulatory bodies who keep a control of how things are happening after having this mandates given out. So if there are things getting caught, you are getting seriously penalized. So we had in 2008, we had this Satyam case where Ramlinga Reddy, Ramlinga Raju, he was playing around with the finance data. Right? When he was caught, he made a statement saying, I was literally riding on a tiger and I didn't know how to get off it without getting eaten. So to that extent, he had manipulated the data and he couldn't come out of it clean. So it is scrutinized to the core, and you get caught very easily when you really try to play with it. Lack of SMEs. There are different industries we are seeing in the world, and every industry has got its own regulation, its own policies, and not everybody understands it. And we need experts who understand it and help implement at the team level so that the product goes out is really compliant. So we lack SMEs there. And cross-border rules that can be contradictory and incomplete or vague. For example, these GDPRs, the PSD2 compliance, they are very specific to European Union. They are framed by European Union countries. But coming to US, they don't care about these specific rules. So when you really interpret those policies, they may not really make sense to some other countries. They don't really need to have those regulations put out.
I think all this words are very true to any organization, to any domain.
Right.
Right? I mean, it is just service or product, etc. And the fourth point of lack of SMS is very, very important. Even a simple statement of work comes under this regulatory thing, which are all basic words of what all high level, what you call the words which only lawyers can understand. And a normal team member, even a project manager, even a program manager can't understand sometimes.
You can't decode it.
Absolutely can't decode it. And as a company, for us to have an access to a lawyer, I mean corporate lawyer, it's quite impossible. It will take about 10 days, 12 days. And most of the times we have blindly signed an expert agreement. And some point of time we have got penalized for some of the work that we did.
So that's where actually I wanted to ask Vijay if it makes sense. If we think one more bullet is about it also comes with a cost, right? It's a cost of delay or a cost of really spending itself.
Cost of violation.
Everything, right? Some a cost that can be running into a few $1 million sometimes. Yeah, because I know that in Philips, they used to say, no, I know this feature is ready and we can get an auditor, but the auditor is so expensive. Charges about an hour costs at 25,000 USD or more or something like that, and a set of 3 such people. So you want to actually put at least 10 features in front of them for the time they are, not one feature and every time you have to spend 100K. For that time, right? So then you say, okay, let us develop 10 features and put it in front of them rather than one feature every time, because it comes with a cost. So
that is actually part of my second problem statement.
Okay, that's wonderful.
So this is one set of problem statement really coming from the content of the regulations and the compliance stuff. Second one being agile teams and methodologies, what we really put in place on ground, our internal and external. So this research says organizational compliance, there are few things like the ISO standard, there are CMMI standards, audits, and the internal organization, there are plenty of compliances in place which will amount up to 20%, and then comes the regulatory compliance which the project really deal with. When they market product, it has to really conform to all the compliance stuff specific to that industry. So this is the split up there. Then right methodology, we had waterfall model earlier and it has its own repercussions. We have agile, few people still use Kanban model, to deal with some of the things, but what really works, it is left to that industry and the particular organization which is implementing it. So we'll see one particular methodology which I have been going through and which I see value coming out of it, and there are ways in which we can still better it. We'll see about that. And SME, PO and architects. So when you really take up such projects in such industries, you really need to understand what those regulatory words mean, what they ask for. For that, our POs and architects understand the outside world, how the systems have been built, how can we really put in those regulatory things into the existing system. They really need to understand the system very well. So from my experience in my current company, we are currently working on PSD2 compliance work. We work on payment security product. So PSD2 compliance, not everybody understands it, not every PO understands it, not every architect understands it. So we have formed a tiger team, right? So where regularly twice or 3 times in a week, the teams keep meeting and then go back with several homework items to say, I studied this part, this part, this part, and they come back and then read it out and then make that point clear to everyone, so that they go back and create their features for their respective components of the projects. So there are different ways how we can deal with it. Fixed timelines, as I said, there is no scope, there is no change to the timeline. If GDPR says by 2018 January I had to be compliant with those many items, I have to be. And by 2019 June I have to be compliant with respect to several items, I have to be. If we bypass that date, I'm definitely going to be penalized for that. Right? And also, no room for failure. When I get into the market, if I get caught violating any of those, it's a serious damage to the product what we have. So unlike Facebook, not everybody can come out clean, right? But Cambridge Analytica, using that data, now it is closed. And so there are several examples what we see in the real world where by violating the regulation, they have shut down now. And there are few companies which could really come out of it and then set the process right. So heavy penalties and loss of market value. So we have, this is a standard picture what we see in any organization as per the market research. So out of this entire circle, 4 pies are different stakeholders what they have identified. So as per the market research, customers stand at 42%, which is bigger chunk. Then shareholders, suppliers and staff. These are 4 major stakeholders of any organization. And we are talking about customers, which is a very bigger chunk. So we need to get into the details. How are we going to solve the problems for the customers? So regulatory and compliance, those are the keywords. And Agile Manifesto, these are the keywords. Just before getting into the next part of it, so we have to understand what those words mean. Most of it is very self-intuitive, and Agile Manifesto, most of us know the meaning of every value what's been listed, right? So we'll talk about verification, validation and compliance specifically, because that's going to be picked up in the subsequent slides more. So what is verification? Verification is an objective evidence that to prove that every requirements have been met. That's saying we have built the solution right. Coming to validation, this is about performing an intended function. So providing an evidence for that, so that it follows the NFRs and other criteria as what has been given out as part of the requirement. So it's about building the right solution. That's part of validation. Then comes the compliance, which is adherence to relevant laws, specifications and guidelines. This is more on the documentation, following guidelines, maintaining documentations and getting a sign off from the authorities, maintaining demonstration sessions with the relevant authorities and the customers. So all of that is part of the compliance. This is to say that evidence to this is just to have an evidence that we do all of this. So these are the keywords for our further slides. So getting into the real topic of how are we able to solve regulatory and compliance requirements for our customers working on the ground. We have one lean principles, chosen some of the lean principle items I'm going to highlight. I work in an organization where SAFe has been implemented. SAFe is a scaled agile framework which most of you might be aware of, and we have seen the value out of it, and we are seeing why several things are done one specific way and how does it really help solve few problems. So I'll be taking some of the examples from scaled agile, and some of the slide content will be from scaled agile framework. So first one being building the solution and compliance incrementally. So this is about taking the compliance and regulatory requirements and start working on it in an incremental fashion, as any agile projects do. So if we do the compliance related projects in an agile way, in a methodical incremental way, we are able to see the results. That's what is going to be shown here. So one beauty of agile is this cycle where we plan, do, check and adjust our operational ways and try to cover where are all the pitfalls in the process. We keep correcting it, we keep validating it, keep demoing it to the stakeholders and get their confidence before we move forward. So that way, gradually when we start implementing parts of it, by the time we reach the end product, it's all in a good state. So at a solution progress, delivery progress and relentless improvement, those are three categories where we call out the objectives, vision and roadmap part of the planning process before the projects kick off. And then we look into the quality, compliance and manufacturability part, and then start framing the features from that angle, and then start working on the, start taking customer feedback, regulatory feedback, validated learning after demoing the working models to the stakeholders. Then having improvement stories. After having the demos given, after doing our own retrospection, identify the improvement areas, start feeding it into our life cycle, then start improving in our subsequent increments. So in the PI, in the SAFe balance, we have PI, which is one program increment, product increment, where one set of features are going to be delivered after this entire cycle is completed. So when you get into the next PI, you are much more matured in the process, more inclined towards what you are doing and what are the learnings. So you are very careful and you start implementing it in a better way.
Vijay, one question. Again, this is again out of my experimentation in the GE healthcare. The quality compliance and regulatory feedback that you try to take in an incremental mode. Normally, people who give you such feedback are not used to any increments, right? I mean, they normally say do everything and then come back to me, right? So how did you overcome such challenge? Because were they really willing to give feedback when you are doing incremental compliance aspects, or?
See, the quality compliance part of it, these are framed as different requirements within features and then given to the teams.
Yeah.
Right. And not the entire compliance stuff is taken as one feature.
So
it's
from the team point of view, it's fine. But when you go back to the people who give you the feedback, regulatory,
so
normally
at the
they are
time of
bodies.
demos, when you provide the evidence that these are all the outcome of the development work, the people like the POs and the architects who have already been through those requirements, they are able to do a check mark on all your items saying this has been completed, this has been completed, and if several aspects have been done in a very different way, that can come back as a requirement. It's a regular feedback cycle. What comes
but you are referring to POs and architects, not the real
not the real
stakeholders.
customers, because it comes in most of the scenarios. It's for example, if you take GDPR and PSD2 compliance, right? They don't care how the individual companies are doing it. whether you are doing it in a sprint mode, BI mode, and waterfallish model, they don't care. But at that particular point in time, when June 2019, if I have to be compliant, they expect you to be compliant.
Correct.
So, those authorities don't come and really participate in your demos to sign it off.
So for them, you will only take at a right milestone when
Correct.
everything is done.
And also there are third-party companies which participate in the demos, and it's based on a billing model.
Okay.
You come and help auditors and give us requirement, give clarity to the requirements, and help in getting the feedback out of the demos, and then help us in sorting out few things.
Okay.
So in our case, we have one of the company called CISA Infotech who do the security part of testing, and they certify the product. For every release, we do a review with them. We run a tool to generate all the vulnerabilities. They sign off saying this is all okay, this is as per the compliance, and you are ready to go. So every product release has got a sign off certification from the third party, and those are the set of people who are coming from an ethical hacking background. So those are specialists in that area. So they come and certify it. So when we sell it out, our customers understand that this has been certified by the relevant authorities. So if there are any feedback items coming from those authorities, it's a very valid feedback to look into.
And you add it to your backlog.
Correct.
So just to add to the point, so when we do the PI planning, before that there is a lot of pre-PI planning which happens with the stakeholders. So typically what he's talking about is the PO demo which happens every sprint within the PI. Now if you see, there is something called a system demo. That is only with the stakeholders and the people who are signing off.
Yes.
So that happens, so your PI can be 8 to 12 weeks. Now within each sprint you don't expect the stakeholders, but during the PI,
system demo?
Yes, system demo. So during the PI, 2-day PI, it starts off with the stakeholders setting the vision for that. So we expect if the Agile release train is consisting of 125 people, we expect the whole 125 people to be face to face, maybe multiple locations based on video conferencing, and then we start off by the stakeholders saying that okay, these are the top features which we are expecting to be completed, and these are the quality or compliance issues. And then when the system demo happens, and it's dedicated 1.5 or 2 hours for only those stakeholders, where we show the actual working software, and we get the feedback, and then that's when it goes as an improvement story, and then that goes into the pre-PI planning for the next PI, and then it goes on. So before we start, we clearly says that okay, it has to have the buy-in from the stakeholders. Without that, it cannot.
In fact, when we tried in GE Healthcare long back, I mean, I was coaching them in 2011-12. That time there was a GE Healthcare had a FDA regulatory guidelines people, and we were trying to see how we can get those specification at the acceptance criteria level or definition of done level. But when we tried to approach them to get the feedback, initially there was a lot of resistance. They had one way of doing it. So the way we tried to deal with that is like there were some people who were key, and they were actually doing some work from the compliance and regulatory point of view. We asked them, do you want to try this so-called Agile and Scrum for some time for yourself? And we gave them some taste of what it means, the incremental things. And once they started seeing some value over a period of 1 or 2 months, then they say, okay, we are interested to engage with you to give you feedback. So we gave them a taste of this. Otherwise, normally they are the very tough people to even seek feedback. So, but at that time, we didn't have any scaled Agile framework in the mainstream. It was like in a very early stage.
So even the SAFe roadmap clearly says, so you need not go with the 4 levels of SAFe. So go with the essential SAFe.
That's now.
2011,
right?
Even Philip started, right?
2011 it was not.
It was like version 2.0.
And we were doing a lot of scaling aspects without any formal frameworks. But the toughest one was involving regulatory.
Because even SAFe didn't have at that. So when he was in GE.
They realized that release on demand. After SAFe coming in, so you release on demand and get call the FDA guys.
It's evolved.
It's evolved. 2012 when we started, the guidelines were not as clear as it is in the last 2 years that has emerged.
Right.
And there is one good example about going wrong after you release it to production.
Yes.
We have this Facebook with the like comment. Right? what worst thing can happen if that functionality goes wrong?
Exactly.
Nothing. Right?
Right.
If you click on a like button, if it doesn't click and doesn't get added there, nothing else.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Similar to any other website where there are several buttons where just to keep track of how many visits, how many clicks and all that.
Yes, yeah.
Just to impress the customers, just to keep the readers engaged,
Yeah.
there are several buttons.
Yeah.
If they don't work, most of the time it doesn't hurt.
Right.
So it's not the case with compliance
Sure.
stuff. Once it is into production,
Yes.
you are obligated to perform one specific way.
Not only the
Zero.
functionality, even in case of healthcare, you're
Healthcare.
supposed to have trained some of the, let's say, radiologists, nurses, everyone should be trained on the
Train,
latest
yeah,
stuff.
that adds to the
Only
cost
then-
also,
yeah,
the
it's
training
cost
cost.
and complexity.
Correct.
Only then they will really approve.
Yes, and also learning from the market in
Yes.
any other regular
Yeah.
agile projects where we give part of the product out to the market. They experiment and then give the feedback, and I'll increment. I'll put it in my next increment and then release the next version of it with that additional feature.
Right.
Again, that doesn't work in a regulatory and compliance thing. One good example is when Google introduced this news website, Google News. When they say they released the news website, it was a very blank collection of all the news and put down in one website. So they had two options: put a filter by location and by date. So they did not know how to go about it, and the functionality of news website was ready. They just released it to market. After people started getting into the website, they realized that then most of the people they go to 300. 300. There is one option there, suggest a feature.
Yeah.
Right? So using that, 300 people came back with saying filter with a date is more beneficial on a news website. Remaining 4 people said need bifurcation by location. So they took the filter by date as the first priority feature for the next increment, and then they took the next one. They did not ignore the second one, but they released the first one. Again, the same thing cannot be applied to regulatory and compliance related projects. So it is either 0 or 1. So either you release it with full product features or no.
So one good example which you quoted was training the nurses, doctors and all. So in SAFE, they are taking that into consideration and they are talking about vendors. So when you go to the solution level layer where they came up with the solution train, so you have to onboard your vendors also. And how do you train the vendors and all, it's your responsibility.
Right, yeah.
And and during the PI planning, even the vendors have to be part of it.
So
like
release
they-
trains are
yes.
being designed and value streams
so,
are identified.
Earlier it was only release train. Now they are talking about solution train.
Solution train.
Where your vendors will also run their own
Sure,
train
okay.
and the solution can have multiple trains.
Got it.
So again, they are inspecting and adapting and
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That is evolving every year.
Out of release train engineers, there are solution train
Solution
engineers.
train.
Next year we'll have another.
So the
Hopefully
second lean principle which we are highlighting, they are not verbatim lean principles per se, but wherever possible, the lean values have been taken here, and then we'll try to correlate here.
This is like optimize the whole value stream.
Correct.
State main
Right. So this is about seeing the end-to-end picture of the system and then trying to optimizing wherever it is possible. So one particular industry, one particular organization may have these many stages: business, PM and system engineering, hardware, software, quality testing, verification, validation, and security. Not necessarily that every company, every project has to have the same set of components in it, right? So as per your organization, as per their own project environment, right, they need to identify the end-to-end cycle of that product and then identify those value streams. Try to tackle that and then try to bridge all of them together to make it as a solution at a very higher level. So that is important. So when you really get into this particular principle of lean, you get to see the entire picture of it. So regulatory compliance requirements you see end to end, and then try to break it down. Try to tackle one by one, put it in an increment, incremented release, and then start seeing the value. Start putting that back into refinement backlog. inspect and adopt, and the demos to take further feedback. So this is a continuous model, and identifying those chunks are the important parts of it.
Can I add one more point to that? So one of the intention of defining the value stream is to see the lead time and the process time. And you need to map it, and you need to see where that particular process time or lead time is taking too much of time, and to reduce waste. That's the main intent, to see okay, how we can reduce waste.
Correct. So in this circling, right, so it could be that there are unnecessary processes within business and PMs. Unnecessary process between hardware, software, quality testing, validation. So are there any waste which we can really eliminate? So that has to be identified, and then squeeze it into 1 or 2 out of 3 and 4. So value stream mapping is also about eliminating waste, and then seeing how you can reduce the time, still coming out with the value. Yeah, thanks for that point. That's a good one. Intention of the circling was to highlight that.
Vijay, you want to take the questions now?
If there are any questions, please feel free
Is it
to.
closer to the time? That's why.
You're almost.
Almost done.
Okay.
Almost done. So the third one being build quality and compliance in. This is all about testing methodology, continuous integration, TDDs, frequent integration, refactoring pair work, and corrective ownership on the Agile side, and regulatory oversight, SMEs who have been trained to look into that. So they are going to keep a watch on that and review audits and sign off from third parties. Bringing all of them together as part of your incremental development process, that is going to improve the product delivery at the end. Unlike in waterfall, where you get to see everything at the end, we are seeing all of this at regular intervals using all these testing methodologies, what is getting as part of the build process. So we have functional test automations, and similar to that, we also have to have compliance test automation. So when you understand there are compliance requirements, frame test cases out of it, test strategies out of it, put it into your regression suite, and create a automation suite out of it. And then after your application functionality test cases are run it through the compliance test automation also, to see where it is falling apart, and then take it as a feedback, and then start improving on that. So progress at the end of it, done. When you say done, it's both on the functionality and compliance part of it. So continuous improvement on learning part of it, right? By demo we get the feedback, how that is happening, and what all are the items which are falling apart, whether the compliance steps are taken care, and quantitative measurements, how much of most of the time code coverage, all these statistics, right? They are taken very lightly by teams, saying it's just a percentage. But if the teams start improving the percentage of it, they find areas to improve where the code can be improvised, the functionality can be improvised, NFS can be better. So having a qualitative measurement is important. There are tools, you don't have to spend the time, but try to invest time in the first time integration, leave it at that. But keep a watch on the statistics coming out of it, and make it as one item for your subsequent increments to take as action items. Retrospective and problem solving workshop, identify where we are going wrong, which all are our bottlenecks in the testing cycle, and where we are falling short on getting the compliance stuff getting out. So make it as one action item for your subsequent increments, and then take care of that.
Here also, like Padma mentioned in the beginning, like cost of delays. If we can introduce cost of deviation, for example, compliance,
Right.
and if we can make it visualize, have metrics around it, that inspect adapt would be much more meaningful from the compliance point of view.
The fourth one being verification and validation, making it as a continuous practice. Right? So one is that iteration verification, which is the responsibility of the development team, what they do, how they do. This is going out as expected, and they have their test automation created at unit test level. So whatever user stories go out of developers' hand, they are all compliant with respect to the requirements. And at iteration validation and system demo, it's the whole responsibility of development team, system team, program-based verification and validation things, where the SMEs come together, see the demo, ask relevant questions, and ensure the feedback goes back to the team, and then they take care of it. PI validation, similarly, similar to the what we saw there, where NFRs are taken care, NFRs are fine, the requirements are all done. So validation comes into picture here, including the compliance. It's all evidence to show that we have done the solution right, we have built the right solution, and we have the proof for what is claimed to be done. So it goes out with the release, not saying this has all been done by the product team.